My name is Stanley Chiu. I'm a class of 2006 alumni with a major in international economics and cultural affairs and a minor in Chinese. I'm submitting this in support of Valparaiso University keeping its Chinese and Japanese studies program. Though CJS was, and probably still is, a small program at Valpo, it attracts students who are deeply passionate about those studies, and the program often has an outsized impact on its students' lives. I didn't start out at Valpo with a passion for Chinese studies. In fact, due to anti-Chinese racism I experienced as a child, I spent most of my life before Valpo trying to get away from being Chinese. I started studying beginner Chinese language my sophomore year at Valpo. I picked the course because I thought my Cantonese-speaking background would make the class a little easier than other languages. Due in large part to Professor Meng, I really enjoyed taking Chinese, and I continued to take Chinese classes with Professor Meng until I graduated from Valpo. Chinese classes hooked me into the larger CGS program. Through attending the weekly Chinese studies ramen noodle lunches, I met other CGS students, learned about CGS careers from visiting alumni, and got to know the Chinese and Japanese studies professors. The small and close-knit community comprised of Chinese studies students and Chinese graduate students and visiting scholars accelerated my understanding of Chinese language and society beyond what was possible through only coursework. The small size of Valpo's CGS program is one of its biggest strengths. Before taking Chinese language and Japanese history classes at Valpo, I didn't know that I could actually enjoy academic classes and look forward to class-assigned readings. I started out at Valpo a finance major because I didn't know what I wanted to do. The joy that I had in Chinese language classes was eye-opening. It got me to start thinking seriously about what I wanted to major in. And the beginning of my spring semester sophomore year, I looked through just about the entire course catalog and picked out the classes that seemed most interesting. I then found a major that could fit those classes, and I ended up changing my major to IECA and a minor in Chinese at the beginning of my junior year. Through generous grants from the CGS program, I was able to take research trips to Japan and China in my junior and senior year, despite coming from a family with an income below the federal poverty line. The trips to Japan and China changed my perspective of the world and would later serve as steps towards my current life. I had not visited another country outside the US and Canada before my trip to Japan. In 2 weeks in Japan, led by Professor Brent Whitefield, I saw how a society and people could function and govern itself in many ways better than the US, despite its vast differences in culture and history. My experience in Japan allowed me to see past US cultural hegemony for the first time, and it helped me to become a better, more objective participant in American democracy. In my senior year, I helped Professor Lin apply for an undergraduate research grant to research Chinese perspectives of China's rise. Professor Lin was awarded the grant, and it gave me and 3 other graduating seniors an opportunity to conduct research in Hangzhou, China for 2 months following graduation. After the research project concluded, I enrolled in a summer Chinese language immersion program that the Chinese and Japanese studies program organized in Hangzhou, China. And an internship at a local company was part of this program, and I was placed at a law firm where I worked as a paralegal and on business development. Due in part to the strength of the Chinese training I received at Valpo, the law firm hired me full-time following the internship. I worked at the law firm for a year, gaining legal, business, and language skills that would help me later in my career. I also met my girlfriend at the time, and she would later become my wife. I learned that I didn't want to work in law, and I saw daily from the 20th story windows the environmental disaster that China was dealing with as a price for its rapid economic growth. Some days after lunch, the air pollution would turn the sky red, and we couldn't see the other buildings 2 blocks away. I saw that work in environmental protection was desperately needed, but being largely ignored. I left the law firm to work towards a career in the environment. I first went to Peking University to strengthen my Chinese language skills outside of the business and legal levels. After finishing studies there, I applied and I was accepted to study for a master's in environment and development at the London School of Economics. It was a very competitive program, and I know that my experience in China was one of the deciding factors that led the head of the master's program to give me a chance at the school. After graduating from LSE, I returned to China because my girlfriend was there. After nearly 6 months of job searching, I was hired by a global environmental consulting firm, ERM, with offices in China. I moved to Shanghai to join the firm and married my wife shortly thereafter. At ERM, I worked on low-carbon development plans for Chongqing Municipality, a city of over 30 million people, and a low-carbon waste treatment plant for Changzhou City in Jiangsu Province. I worked on nearly 20 green financing projects in China and South America, where I reviewed hydropower projects for compliance with international social and environmental standards and local regulatory compliance. After having my daughter, I moved back to the US so that my daughter could grow up in a place with a less harmful environment. The move was relatively smooth since ERM had an opening in their Houston office. I continued to have occasional opportunities to work with Chinese companies in Houston. I now work for a former client of ERM after the firm assigned me to temporarily fill in an open position at my current plant, and the company that owned the plant hired me directly after a couple months. I can trace back to Valpo's Chinese and Japanese Studies program for most of the significant steps I've taken in my adult life. I moved to China after graduating from Valpo due to a grant awarded to the CJS program. My first full-time job at a Chinese law firm was possible because of the 3 years of Chinese language learning at Valpo and the summer internship arranged by CJS in Hangzhou, China. It was also in this period that I met my future wife. I was accepted into my top choice for a master's program because of my China experience and recognition by my professors that we won't solve the climate crisis without getting China on board. My China experience and Chinese language skills were crucial to obtaining a job at an environmental consulting firm in China and to my work at the firm helping China develop its infrastructure with less environmental impact. The quality of my work in China helped me make a smooth transition back to the US, where I feel more comfortable growing my family. Though my current role doesn't take advantage of my Chinese skills, I suspect I will put them to use at some point in the future. I would have never guessed upon graduating in 2006 that 5 years later I'd be working on environmental issues in China. In 2011, I would have never guessed that I'd be back in the US working at a chemical facility in the Houston area in 2016. I'm coming up on another 5 years since 2016, and I'm ready to take another step in my career. I'm not sure where that will be, but I know that the foundational skills that CJS helped build in me have prepared me to take on a bigger role, and one that will likely include China in the near future.